He had the lot. He was a complete all-round player as far as I was concerned.
He was a colossal player and very difficult to play against because he was so strong and so big for his age.
I don't think we'll see anybody like Duncan again. He was really incredible. Someone of his age and his maturity, both physically and mentally, in every way. He had everything.
He was such a nice person. He was so modest about things that he really, you were always pleased to see him. And I know the rest of the team were always pleased to see him because here's this strength and this power in an England side.
Wolves, Albion, and all of them, they were all after him, you know. And I said, well, I don't know what you're going to do soon. I said, you'll have to make your mind up sooner or later. He said, I'm going to bed, Mum, this is at the night, you know. I said, okay then. He said, I'll tell you more about it in the morning. So when he got up next morning, he come downstairs, you know, he says, I've cut them all off, he says. All of them that's been, he says, I'm only going to one team. I said, and where's that? He said, Manchester United.
Without any shadow of doubt, he would have been the greatest player that ever lived. Make no mistake about that at all.
The world, wherever you go, black country folk, they will soon let you know. If you're friendly and true, you're welcome to stay, to sup and to drink any time of the day. Strong in the arm, strong in the head, black country born and black country bred. Strong in the arm, strong in the head, black country born and black country bred.
Duncan Edwards was born on the 1st of October 1936 to Gladstone and Sarah Edwards in the small market town of Dudley in the West Midlands. Iron foundries and forges provided the main source of employment for the local workforce. The area resounded with the permanent drone of working hammers, and the sky was dulled by thick plumes of smoke. Hence the area was known as the Black Country. Football offered an escape route from the back-breaking routine of manual labour, and young Duncan quickly proved to be a natural at the game.
He was kicking the ball before he could walk. Of course, I used to buy a pair of reins for him then, you know. They went round him and the straps at the back, and the bells would be on the front of him, you know. And his dad would sit down and he'd have him off me, you know, and he'd hold this strap at the back. He'd put the ball on the floor and Duncan would be kicking it, you know, like that.
From an early age, it was evident that Duncan had the kind of dedication needed to reach the pinnacle in any sport. He would spend hours practicing his skills at the nearby Priory Park, perfecting the awesome blend of technique and power that would one day electrify crowds from Manchester to Madrid. Someone who remembers this schoolboy prodigy well is former childhood teammate Fred Brookes.
I had the pleasure of playing, or the privilege of playing with Duncan in 1951-52 for the local schoolboy, for the local town team, along with other members from our school. My first memories of Duncan was how big he was. So big, so broad, and so good at the game of football, his control of the ball and everything. And he was just a born leader. I actually knew Duncan from probably a few years before that, because when you play for the school, you play against the same schoolboys year in, year out, from one school, the junior school to the senior school. But to actually play with him and see how good he was at that age, he was just like a true today, professional, man professional amongst boys.
Never a show of Duncan, you know. He'd go and play, you know, for the school, like that. And he'd have his bag. And I wouldn't know till I got his clothes out of that bag what he'd won. Or whether it was a medal or a plaque, you know. Because he won plaques as well as his medals, you know. But it was never a show-off with anything like that, you know, if he won anything, no. No, he just played because he loved the football.
Yes, I knew Duncan when he was around the age of 8, 9, 10 and 11, when he was playing school football in the borough. He was obviously an outstanding footballer at that stage. Well, of course, with Duncan Edwards, it wasn't just a case of playing football for the schools and organised football. Duncan would always play football with anyone. Wherever there was a ball, Duncan Edwards was there.
We were playing at Redditch, at Dudley. The only time we did manage to get out was if Duncan had the ball, and he was such a big man. And I remember him now going up the left, because he was more on the left side player than the right. And one or two of the young lads trying to chase after him. And imagine a big man, you know, so big, battling a gale, carrying the ball with him, and failing young lads trying to catch him. And that was actually true. It was absolutely freezing. It was a gale force wind. It's the only time we got out of our penalty area.
A school essay dated the 10th of December 1951 shows how close Duncan was to realising his boyhood dream.
A true wish. Well, it all began when I was a little boy of about 7 years of age. I heard my father talking about a place by the name of Wembley Stadium. It was a wet day in April, and my Uncle George and Dad were sitting around the fire, and my Uncle George said to my father, "I see England are playing Scotland at Wembley next Saturday." "Are they?" my father replied. I thought to myself, now's my chance to ask them where this Wembley Stadium is, while they're on the subject. So I turned to my uncle and asked him where this stadium was, and he replied, "Duncan, this stadium, as you call it, is the third biggest football stadium in the world and situated in London." I told my uncle I wish I could go there, and he said I would before long. I was 13 and I still wanted to go to Wembley, and on the 1st of April I was picked to play for England against Wales at Wembley Stadium. My uncle was right when he said I would someday go to Wembley Stadium.
Duncan played for England's schoolboys for 3 successive years from 1950 and became captain of the side. Everyone was interested in this new wonder boy of football. Many of the local teams wanted to sign Duncan, while the likes of Everton, Blackpool and Manchester United were also keen.
I said, "Well, my son, it's your life." I said, "You go where you want to go." I said, "It's your life."
And we was hoping that Duncan would go to one of the Wolves, personally.
And he went straight from school to United.
There was a presentation to Duncan at the Dudley Technical College. And who made the presentation to him was the famous Wolves goalkeeper Bert Williams. And it was at that meeting that we were told that he was signed for Manchester United, I believe, that day.
The morning after his 16th birthday, the 2nd of October 1952 at 2 a.m, Duncan signed for Manchester United. The nucleus of the legendary Busby Babes was now in place. Former teammate Bill Foulkes recalls his first meeting with United's new star.
The first time I met Dunk was, I was a part-time player, and we used to train twice a week in Manchester, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And one Thursday afternoon, Duncan showed up as a schoolboy, and we couldn't believe the ability that he had and the strength and maturity of a schoolboy. And that was my first impression of Duncan then.
Well, I first saw Duncan Edwards playing for England schoolboys, and he was an outstanding young player, captained England schoolboys the year before I did. And he joined Manchester United, and I was in doubt whether to join Manchester United at that time because they had so many good players. But I went to see them play Wolverhampton Wanderers in the final of the Youth Cup, which they won 7-2. and I saw this giant playing at left half. I was a right half at that time, and I thought it'd be marvellous to play in the same team as this guy, because he was so outstanding. And that was my main reason for joining Manchester United.
Well, if I can say that when I first met Duncan, it was for Manchester United at the Oakhorns in a league game. Before the kick-off, I looked at him and thought, oh hell, look at them build on that man. And I mean, I'm different now, obviously, because of the years they've taken his toll. But when I saw him, he looked
And how did you feel against him that day?
Very, very strong.
Well, the first time I actually met Duncan Edwards and played against him was at Preston North End in the league match. It was the beginning of the Busby Babes. I remember they beat us 5-2 and they were absolutely awesome. And I thought he was a 16-year-old kid, about 6'1", with 13 stone, magnificent skill, awesome.
Duncan made his first-team debut against Cardiff City at Old Trafford on Easter Monday 1953, just 16 years of age. By the mid-50s, United manager Matt Busby and coach Jimmy Murphy were close to creating their dream team. Gregg, Foulkes, Byrne, Coleman, Jones, Whelan, Blanchflower, Violet, Edwards, Taylor, Charlton, Scanlon. They were the cream of emerging talent. Duncan also made an instant impression with the then England manager, Sir Walter Winterbottom.
I went down to see the under-23 team play in Romania, and we had to struggle to win that game. We finally won it with a goal by Johnny Haynes. But there was a stage when he dribbled himself up to the edge of the penalty area, could have scored himself, but he wanted to bring David Pegg, who was his own teammate at Manchester United. But David Pegg in, he passed the ball to David so that he would involve him in the game. This is how generous he was in spirit like this. And we had to try and correct him from this kind of thing. And we got in the way of saying to him, you know, when you get on a dribble like that, Duncan, for heaven's sake, go all the way, shoot. And this became a feature of the England players, to be able to, when they saw Duncan dribbling away, they'd shout, all the way, Duncan. And sure enough, we went to Czechoslovakia after this Romania match, and in the first half he scored 2 goals like this.
Because he was so great a player, we used to maybe rely on him. You know, there's the story of when we played Chelsea in a Youth Cup semi-final, and we had people like Bobby Charlton in the team, David Pegg. I played in the team, like Col Shea Brennan, all became internationals. And the assistant manager, Jimmy Murphy, before the game started, was in his team and talk. I'll always remember it. He said, look, you're great players yourselves. Don't just think of Duncan. Don't have an Edwards complex. Go out and tear them apart like you can do with your passing and your shooting as a team. And at half-time, it was 0-0, and we were struggling to break through. And what was decided that Duncan would go centre forward. So he was moved up, and Jimmy Murphy finalised his half-time team talk by saying, and remember, this half, whenever you get the ball, all of you, look for Duncan. And we did, and we won, and he scored the goals that won the game for us. So that was how he was even as a youth team player, because as we know, as a youth team player, he was also playing for England. He was absolutely outstanding.
I didn't see much of him when we went to United, you know, because they're playing all the while. But he'd come occasionally, and he'd come with his armful of flowers like this, and a box of chocolates or something. He said the lad used to laugh at him on the coach for bringing the flowers and the chocolates, you know. And then as it went on, he got to go in the army.
Duncan was about 18. I was 5 years older than Duncan, 23. We turned up at Manchester, at the Piccadilly, and of course the rail strike was on, and they just put us in the back of a truck, and we went to Birmingham. We couldn't believe it. We in the back of a truck, and from Birmingham they put us in a minibus, and Duncan was practically thrown out at Woolwich Arsenal, and I was going on to Aldershot, and but seeing Duncan getting off the truck, off the truck and going into the barracks, tears rolling down his cheeks. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You know. But that was Duncan. He did his national service. We got through it. And after that, we had some great wins. Although while we had national service, we both played for United, and we won the championship back to back. Actually, the 2 years we were in doing national service, we won the championship on 2 occasions.
At the age of 18, Duncan was picked to play for England at full international level against Scotland. A year later, he faced the old enemy once more, figuring in a 1-1 draw that saw the home championship title shared.
The English forwards are soon hitting back, but goalie Tom Younger is there every time. Less than a minute to go and Scotland think it's all over, bar the shouting. Then, without warning, Johnny Haynes slips through. Younger jumps, but it's in. Scotland are thunderstruck.
We had a famous match in Berlin when we played against the German team that won the World Cup. And we were all a little tremulous about this match. 100,000 people in Berlin Stadium, and a lot of our soldiers were there at that time. And the major in charge of this outfit came along to us and said, for heaven's sake, do win if you can, but don't disgrace us by being thrashed by this German team.
In Berlin's Olympic Stadium, England, in the dark shirts, meet Germany, the World Cup holders. Early German attacks are fended off by the brilliant work of Reg Matthews, the Coventry City goalkeeper. When he does miss, his backs don't let him down.
For the first 25 minutes we were suffering, and then Duncan got the ball at the centre circle and dribbled along through the team, and the shout came all the way, Duncan. He shot up from outside the penalty area and crashed past the goalkeeper. We were 1 up, and we never looked back after that.
Johnny Haynes has the ball, he passes upfield and Granger nips in. Retter tackles him, but he's through, and the goalie's beaten. England are 2 up. Now England are well into their stride. Duncan Edwards pushes through towards the German goal. A general tussle in the goal mouth, and Johnny Haynes slips it neatly home. So now England are 3 up, and the German fans are far from happy. The home team gather their forces to save something from the wreckage, but Reg Matthews punches away and Billy Wright clears. But Germany keeps up the pressure, and with only 5 minutes to go, Fritz Walter saves his team from a whitewashing. But it's too late to prevent a victory, which does much to restore England's waning soccer prestige in Europe.
Legendary Preston North End and England international Sir Tom Finney recalls how impressed he was when the 18-year-old Duncan made his England debut.
He came in and was an outstanding prospect right from the word go. He was an extremely big boy for his age, very, very strong, good control of the ball, and could pass, and of course could shoot. A terrific shot on him, and scored many outstanding goals. So he was a bit special, there's no question about that. He had a great temperament for the game, and I think you've got to have that at that age to play in the company he was playing in, and he came into the side as though he was a regular member of it, as though he'd played there all his life, and it wasn't really a shock to me, because I felt he had outstanding ability, and I've often said that irrespective of age, it doesn't matter if you've got the ability, you can play at any age, and he certainly did that when he came in the England side. He wasn't at all nervous, and certainly never showed on the field of play. And he went about his job as though he was playing an ordinary league game.
Duncan had everything, and whereas I try to describe him as the complete all-rounder, because when he had the ball, he was our best attacker. He could hit long passes, short passes, he could dribble. He was so nippy on his feet for a big guy, and he was tremendous in the air. The ball used to come and rocket at him, and he'd control it with his chest. The ball would drop at his feet, and then he made things happen for Manchester United at all levels. And not only that, where he was better than the other players was when the ball was lost, he was the first to get it back. I haven't seen anybody give Duncan a chasing ever. Nobody really went past him. Everything stopped at Duncan Edwards.
He had this capacity of tremendous power in his shooting. In fact, we used to do a testing of kicking power by having sticks in a line, a slow motion camera, and seeing who had the strongest and most powerful kick and who should come out top but Duncan. So here was a man of this confidence, and this supreme confidence that he had in himself was, as it were, carried through the England team.
We clashed at international level at Wembley, Scotland versus England, and they beat us again, and he was just getting better and better and better. This was roughly about a year after I actually met him in league football.
Wembley Stadium and the decisive match for the International Championship. Scotland kick off and the fans from over the border get a tremendous thrill as Scotland race away to a fine start and take the lead after only a minute. Outside left, Tommy Ring slams in a low one.
We got on very well on the field playing against Scotland, which we won. So, and he scored and I scored. So it was good fun together.
England on the warpath for the equaliser. Derek Kevan, making his Wembley international debut, heads it neatly past Younger.
Well, I recall one when we played Scotland at Wembley, and he scored the winning goal, and it was a terrific shot from just outside the box and just went into the net like a bullet. And he, for a youngster to come into a side and play at a place like Wembley and be so outstanding was really something we hadn't seen for quite some time.
We were playing Ireland at Wembley on one occasion, and we were 1 goal down at half-time, and he came into the dressing room where, as the other players were feeling a bit down in the mouth, he just simply said, "Walter, don't worry, I'll get you a goal in the second half." And this business of him being able to score goals was one of the features of him.
Duncan was a modest, very strong black country accent, but very modest as well. Shy at times. Very rarely did I see him lose his temper. I think there was only once, that was when Matt Parland of Aston Villa collided, or we say headbutted, but collided with Ray Wood, the goalkeeper, in the final at Wembley. And I think it was then I saw him lose his temper, but regain it before he got to Matt Parland, fortunately for everybody concerned, But he was a shy, modest man, young man, who had a spark of humour as well, and he was a gentle giant. He was a great fellow.
Duncan's popularity spans generations. Lifelong fan Bert Hill explains how he first heard about the Dudley phenomenon.
Yeah, my interest with Duncan Edwards came a long time ago when I remember my father was talking about this so-called footballer that could do everything at a young age of 18 years of age, and the name Duncan Edwards then cropped up, and I made it my goal then to find out as much as what I could on Duncan Edwards. It's an absolute privilege having to talk about Duncan Edwards, although I didn't actually see him play. I was only 4 years of age when the Munich air crash happened. But I'm a big fan of West Bromwich Albion, and I saw Derek Kevan play in '63 against Fulham, and Derek made his debut for England in, I think it was '57 against Scotland, where Duncan Edwards played as well. And I know that Derek scored on his debut. But yeah, I've collected things on Duncan Edwards over a number of years, and I've had many a conversation that through my job I have to go to Manchester, and I'm talking to guys in a pub that they're quite surprised at a lad of my age, because the first question he's asked, obviously, well, how do you know about Duncan Edwards?
Although he was unassuming, he was confident. He was very confident. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he wanted. And he was nobody's fool, was Duncan. And we all respected him. Everybody respected him, both as a person and as a player. I mean, he was phenomenal as a player. And we all recognised this. Every player respected him in the team. He was an England international and a household name while I was a teenager. So everybody had to respect him and his ability.
He played, actually on left half, which was really on my side of the field, and I was playing directly opposed to him. Very difficult to play against because he was so strong and so big for his age, and he had, it was absolutely everything you could wish for in an outstanding player.
the story I remember as well, which was when Duncan was playing, it was against Spurs, and in the team we had a good team, but it was difficult, and I always remember, I think it was Bobby Smith, going by a couple of players, and he was about to put the ball into the empty net when Big Dunk put his foot there, and the ball stayed still, and Bobby Smith went flying into the net, and Big Dunk looked up and he saw me on the edge of the penalty area, and he passed the ball to our right half, Eddie Coleman, and Eddie swiveled his hips and he sent their team one way and the crowd the other, and then he backheeled it to Duncan Edwards, who from the edge of his penalty area hit this ball 50 yards below head height all the way to David Pegg, our left winger, who controlled it with one touch, and he slipped it inside to Bobby Charlton, and Bobby let it run through his legs, then curled the ball into the Spurs half, and there was Duncan Edwards running from our penalty area into their half with 3 Spurs players in front of him. He dribbled delicately past the first, he smashed through the second, and the third jumped out of the way. And for 30 yards he shot, and the ball flew in the back of the net. Everybody in the crowd stood up cheering. The great Duncan Edwards, and that's how great he was. Very, very special.
Along with his teammates, Roger Byrne and Tommy Taylor, in the England team at that time, this Busby Bay confidence, as it were, transferred itself to the England team. We felt we were sure going to win the World Cup. You know, it was building up all the time. In a way, it was cheeky, but nevertheless, it was there, and a lot of this stemmed from Duncan.
Just when it seemed that Duncan Edwards and the rest of the Busby Babes were about to take football by storm, tragedy struck on February the 6th, 1958.
Here is the news. So far, we know there are 23 survivors after Manchester United's air crash at Munich this afternoon. The aircraft was a twin-engined Elizabethan on charter from BEA. It was returning from Belgrade, where Manchester United had entered the semi-final of the European Cup. It had reached Munich and was just taking off for home in poor weather when the crash came at 3 o'clock. It plunged from about 60 feet, bursting into flames near houses.
We tried to get off first time, and then he went back down the runway, tried it again, second time, and pulled up very sharp. Halfway down the runway, realised there was something seriously wrong. So he took us back to the terminal, and everybody got out, and some had coffee, tea, whatever, just sit down, relax. We all felt there was something wrong, you know. After twice getting off, of course, everybody was a little apprehensive. Even Big Frank Swift, the former Manchester City and England goalkeeper, he said, I'm going into the back, it's sitting in the back, it's much safer there. You know, he was half joking, half serious. And David Pegg, who had been playing cards with us, with Albert Scanlon, myself, he decided to leave the centre of the aircraft and went to the back. And then he started to go. I just sensed that there was something wrong, and I strapped my seatbelt very, very tight, got my head below the rim of the seat. It was quite a high seat, quite a lot of room in the aircraft, and off it went. I felt, looking through the window, and the snow flying along, looking through the window on my left, and on my right was Johnny Berry, Roger Byrne, Billy Whelan, on another table opposite, and Billy Whelan said, as we were going away, he said, well, if anything happens, I'm ready. He was a staunch Catholic. And I realised what he meant afterwards, you know, and it just went, and then there was one tremendous bump as we were going down the runway, and then another one. Then I thought, well, if there's another one, we won't be able, we're going to go, because it was sickening, you know. And of course we had it. It was blast. And seemingly the plane was cut in half, and it went right across Johnny Berry and Roger Byrne and Billy Whelan, and that's when it was sliced in half there, right underneath my feet on a diagonal. Albert Scanlon was thrown up. He was sitting opposite. he was thrown out. And I just sat there. I don't know how long I was out. It must have been a few seconds or a minute or what. I don't know. But it wasn't long. And I came to, and I looked through the window first, usually, naturally. And then I tried to get my seatbelt off. And then Captain Finney knocked on the window and said, "Get out, because the engine is smoking." So I couldn't get out because I couldn't get the seatbelt off. So I started to panic a little bit. And then I realised I had no shoes on. And eventually got the belt off. And then ran. There was just a big hole in the aircraft which I went through. And ran about 30 yards. And as I turned around, I could see the whole picture, you know. With one end aircraft was still stuck when it was sliced off in flame. And the other one, about 100 yards away, spinning, had spun away. So I turned around and came back to the aircraft and saw Harry Gregg coming from the other side of the aircraft with a baby in his arms. I didn't realise there was a baby on board. And where Duncan was sitting, I don't really know. I didn't know whether he was sitting at the back or was sitting in the front, but obviously he must have been at the back. So when I saw, walking around, I saw some players who were in pain or in trouble, and saw Matt Busby, and we helped him. Bobby Charlton came. Bobby took his overcoat off, put it underneath Matt, because he was lying in water, in snow that had melted. And we put the thing under Matt, and Matt was sort of leaning on his arm, on one arm. So when we moved him and put him level, which was the worst thing we could have done, he just groaned, you know. But fortunately the stretcher bearers came very quickly and threw the stretchers down, put him on the stretcher, and whipped us off.
News of the crash quickly came through the wires and stunned the people back home in England.
Well, I heard it really through other people, but then I listened to it on the radio, and then I bought the newspapers to find out what had happened. And, well, quite honestly, I was dejected. I was dejected in so many ways because some of my friends were on that aircraft, quite apart from the footballers.
I was in Manchester city centre in the afternoon. I'd been to see a specialist because I should have been on the trip but twisted my knee on the Saturday, and it was diagnosed as a torn cartilage, so that put me out for the season. And I saw a placard which said Man United in crash on runway. So my first reaction was, well, on runway they might have bumped into something. I didn't realise it was on taking off and that there were fatalities. And when I was with a friend who worked for one of the newspapers and went to the newspaper offices, and that's where I found out that people had lost their lives and just couldn't believe it. And it was a long time coming through because they didn't give names out. They just gave a few names of survivors, and I can remember praying, hoping that all my friends would be safe.
It came on the radio that there'd been a crash, and somebody came in and said to me, you know, that Manchester United aeroplanes crashed, and but there was no confirmation of it, and he just said it's on the news now, and I'll let you know inside 5 minutes. And then came back, of course, and said everybody had been killed, and then, of course, there were, you know, it was filtering through the news that there were so many had been saved, but they didn't know who they were.
When the accident happened, I was actually in Germany, and I was acting as a wireless operator. Should have been listening to Morse code and teleprinting, but we got the RT on, the American Forces Network, which we do, listening to that, and a news flash came on that the Manchester United football team was part of the passengers in a plane crash at Munich. And it just devastated us. I mean, imagine we were all, I suppose, around the same age as Duncan, who was on that camp, and it absolutely devastated us.
Well, I was coaching in a place called Standish near Wigan, and I was coming home about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I saw the billboards, United in plane scare, and I thought, oh, it's typical press again, blowing it out of all proportion. And then when I got home and had heard the news, I couldn't realise that weeks before I'd played against Duncan, and at that particular time he was fighting for his life.
By midnight the press had arrived and were trying to get a picture of what had happened, you know. But we were so shocked we couldn't do anything, couldn't say anything. But the following day we went to the hospital to see the boys. And one thing that really struck me, and I always think about it when I spoke to the doctor, and I said, oh, they don't look so bad, you know. I asked how Johnny Berry was. He said, but the doctor said, oh, he's pretty bad, you know. And I said, how about Duncan? Duncan looked as usual, you know. He said, oh, 50-50. So if Duncan's 50-50, then he's okay. You know.
And then I heard the news that Duncan Edwards, fortunately, hadn't been killed. And my heart leapt, because here was the player who counted a great deal more than anybody else probably in the England side.
But it wasn't to be, and on the 21st of February 1958, 15 days after that fateful afternoon, Duncan Edwards quietly passed away in his sleep. He was 21.
It never entered my head that he would die. Of course, we were devastated when he gave us the news that Duncan had died in hospital. So, of course, everybody was in shock, and they couldn't believe it. You know, he's possibly one of the greatest footballers of all time. He's just died, 21 years old. It's very sad.
He'd have been here today if it hadn't smashed his kidneys. He was all smashed up. His leg was broke, his wrist was broke, you know, his ribs were broke. But he was skycoking all then. The doctors was amazed how quick he was healing up, you know, his bones. But of course both his kidneys were smashed to pulp.
And because the sadness of it was, a few days later, my wife came to me because she heard it on the news that Duncan had died too. And again, the dejection, you know, you feel... In fact, I was almost in tears.
Well, you were getting the news on a regular basis through radio and TV to say that he was fighting hard, but he was in a critical condition, and everybody, I mean, we were all saying our prayers for him, hoping, of course, that he would make it, along with one or two of the others who, of course, were critically ill as well. But it was not to be, and unfortunately for England and for Manchester United, we lost a great prospect for English football.
When we heard Duncan had died, it was like a knife being plunged into, because we thought Duncan was going to make it. He was the strong, the Iron Man, and it was such a blow to everybody when we heard that he hadn't come through, because people, the doctors and the surgeons, were suggesting that he was getting stronger, and it was a tremendous blow to everybody. And well, at the time we couldn't believe it, because somebody that powerful, that strong, so much a battler in his young life, we knew, or we felt, that he was the one that was going to pull through. And it really was a blow to all of us when he didn't.
Difficult to comprehend that he was no longer with us. You know, long before his prime, I mean, he would have been the greatest player ever, make no mistake about that at all. Pelé and people like that, Cruyff and Beckenbauer and George Best, fantastic players, but I think Duncan would have surpassed them all.
The last game he played was at Red Star Belgrade, and he just ran the show. He ran the whole game. He was unbelievable. He just the field was quite muddy, and he had this ability. The mud didn't make any difference to his passes. He had the strength and the finesse. He used to sort of skim the ball over the top of the mud with such power, with spin, that it made no difference. You know, he could do this. And lesser mortals, we were struggling in the mud, but Duncan, it didn't make any difference to him. He had everything. You know, I mean, he was a perfect player. And I've never seen any perfect player since. And I think the fact that we played the following Wednesday here at Old Trafford in a cup match against Sheffield Wednesday, I think that helped Terry Gregg and myself to overcome the shock and everything. and we carried on playing. You know, we just kept playing and playing.
He got a professor over him, Duncan had, looking after him. Yeah. And he was also looking after Mad Busby. And of course when he knew that Duncan had passed away, he didn't want to live. They had to will him to live again, Mad Busby. He didn't want to know. He wanted to die. Yeah. Of course really there was only Bobby left really, out of the big players, you know, to put him tang on too really, you know what I mean. And he did try to get another team, you know, like them, but he couldn't. He couldn't get another team like them. They blended in that well together, you know. It was lovely to watch them play.
Duncan's body was brought home on the 22nd of February 1958, and on the 26th he was buried at the town cemetery after a service at St. Francis Church, just a short distance from his parents' home.
In the days of good Queen Bess, yar boys, oh. In the days of good Queen Bess, yar boys, oh. In the days of good Queen Bess, Coventry outdone the rest. Yar boys, oh, the brave Dudley boys. But in the times as be, yar boys, oh. But in the times as be, yar boys, oh. But in the times as be, we've outdone old Coventry.
I think he would have gone all the way. I think he would have been an outstanding player for England for many, many years, and because he came into the England side as a young 18-year-old and had outstanding abilities, and so England suffered a very, very great loss, and he would have been one of the all-time greats, in my opinion, of English football. I have great sadness in realising not only was it a tremendous loss to Manchester United and to England, the England team, but it was also a loss to football. He was a magnificent boy, always cheerful, always smiling, always ready for a laugh and a giggle. He was a lovely lad.
Well, tippin' lads, they did us join, yar boys, oh. Tippin' lads, they did us join, yar boys, oh. Tippin' lads, they did us join, and we formed a strong combine. Yar boys, oh, the brave Dudley boys. Well, we've marchin' into town, yar boys, oh. We've marchin' into town, yar boys, oh. We've marchin' into town, resolved to pull the housen down. Yar boys, oh, the brave Dudley boys.
I'd have loved my lad to have been one of the lucky ones anyway. Yeah. But as I say, it wasn't to be. We don't know what's beyond, do we? Maybe we're stuck to do greater things somewhere else, who knows? We don't know, do we? Always think that. We don't know what's beyond. Nobody. It's a mystery to us.
He was such a nice, quiet, unassuming young man. He just loved to play football. I think today, when I see some of the players today, and I see some of the managers today comparing certain players with Duncan Edwards, and I just say to myself, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, times they be mighty queer, yar boys, oh. Times they be mighty queer, yar boys, oh. Times they be mighty queer, and victual it was very dear. Yar boys, Oh, the brave Dudley boys.
The great sadness is that he didn't play long enough to show everybody in the world, what a tremendous player he was. We knew it because we trained with him and worked with him, and people like Bobby Charlton have come through to be perhaps England's greatest ever forward or player, and he will tell you, and well, there was nobody to touch the great Duncan Edwards. Even he couldn't compare with Duncan, and how great he became. Just imagine how great Duncan Edwards would have become, and that is the sadness. Nobody, in my opinion, will ever compare because of his all-round greatness, his all-round talent. A captain of England he would have been without doubt.
Oh, who knows what might have been. Well, I say we've all got to meet one day, don't they? So who knows? Nobody knows, do they?
He was a terrific person to know. He was always friendly, always courteous, almost polite. He really was too good to be true. But he was, but then as a player, he was like he was the perfect player. He could do anything. He could defend, he could attack. I mean, Eric Cantona was a brilliant player, but he couldn't do what Duncan Edwards did.
Duncan's memory still lives on in his beloved hometown. 40 years after his death, he is remembered at his local church, St. Francis, and the town's leisure centre, which houses his many caps and medals. His resting place in the nearby cemetery is a shrine for hundreds of visitors each year, with some coming from as far afield as Australia to pay respects to their hero. One wonders what he'd have gone on to achieve had he survived. On the 6th of February 1958, on a snowy runway in Munich, a dream may have died, a team may have died, but the memory lives on.
Thinking about him in the short time I knew him, and it didn't change him, his stardom. He still knew the lads and he never forgot us. But whoever invented this game of football many years ago must have seen or known that there was somebody named Duncan Edwards someday going to come along to play the game the way he meant it to be played. I just can't think of anybody who could have played it better, his application to it at all. And I think the game of football in my mind was made for Duncan Edwards, the way he performed it.
Talking about football, when he was in the hospital, he got it on his mind. He said, "Get me out of here, Mum, else I shall never come out." He said, "I've got other things to do besides lie here." That's what he said to me. I said, oh, okay then. I said, "I'll get you out as soon as I can," talking to him like that. And I said, "Well, you better hurry up and get better." I says, "'Cause you got your car, back home." He said, "Oh, you'll keep it on the road, Mum. Keep it on the road, Mum. Till I'll get better,